Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Dan Nessel Show. I'm your host, Dan Nessel. As we head into this new year, and we're very hopeful and thinking about change, and thinking about change and the changing nature of how we connect and the stories that we tell each other. And pandemic, post-pandemic. I don't necessarily want this show to be anchored at a particular point in time, but just to understand the context here, we are in the middle of things still, and everybody's looking forward to change. But look, change is something that is forefront in my mind, is I guess the point. And my guest today is really at the forefront of how we engage with one another, how organizations engage with their audiences through video and evolving digital event platforms. Actually, it's kind of cool area to be in right now. He's an award-winning video producer who tends to work quite a bit with nonprofits. He's an entrepreneur who's finding new ways to build communities through virtual events. He's the resident director and producer at Open Windows Productions, and he started a new virtual event platform, the Virtual Event Center. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of fun with this episode, because I'm really looking forward to talking about creativity, video, drones, tequila, all kinds of good stuff here with the one and only Henry Schneider. Henry, it is really good to see you. Thanks for joining the show.
Awesome to see you, Dan. Real pleasure to be here. I'm honored because you've had some spectacular guests, so I hope I can live up to your high bar of past guests on here.
It's interesting you said that, because I was just listening to one of my previous episodes, as I do when I'm preparing them to be published. And one of the things that I had said was this sort of principle of transitivity when it comes to guests. Like, I have great people on, and I really appreciate all my guests. I think everybody's got something tremendous to offer. And when they recommend somebody to me, it's like automatically you pass the bar, because there's that, why would they recommend somebody to me who wasn't already at a certain standard? And you were recommended to me by Brandon Wetstein, and he was tremendous with his Lego story. And he's such a creative guy. And anybody that he sent me is just, I've been impressed so far. And he's connected me with a few people. So actually, the bar is already pretty high. It's set pretty high, and I don't have any fears whatsoever that you're not going to clear that bar that Brandon has actually set. But it's great to see you, and I'm just glad you're here. I love having different kinds of people on the show. I mean, you're an entrepreneur. You have a video production company, but you've also had a really fascinating life. You've been all over the place, done some killer stuff. I mean, you're an award-winning producer. And what was the show you did back in the 2000s?
Yeah, How to Make Everything was a show that turned YouTube channel and has found a lot of success on YouTube. I'm not working with that show currently, but was executive producer at the time to help kind of transition it from what was originally actually a documentary film that was circling around the film festival circuits, and wound up in my lap. And someone was like, this would make an awesome TV show. And I was like, yeah, you're right. It would make a really good TV show. And that's what we did with it. But then it quickly... after season 1 of that show, we immediately pivoted it to YouTube, where we actually had a lot more success with that format.
Yeah, and that wasn't that long. It was like 5-6 years ago. And it's not exactly, I mean, YouTube was already huge and taking, big at the time, but I think it was even less so than it is now, right? So you're almost in the early days of pioneering, content, transitioning content from broadcast to YouTube. So it's a kind of interesting area to have been in. And I think we're going to get to that in a second, but I wanted to double back first and just kind of really so how did you get there? Like you went from Best Buy in the early part of your career, and that's how Brandon met you, but you went from Best Buy all the way to being an award-winning producer and now an entrepreneur. So how did this happen?
I was a motivated young person, I guess that you would say. I look back now and kind of see that. At the time, I guess I wouldn't have recognized myself as being that way. But certainly, I was working at Best Buy while I was going to school at Minneapolis College of Art and Design to get my filmmaking degree. And from that, just quickly transitioned my degree. It actually was my senior year that I had to do an internship. I interned at the local Fox affiliate, and that internship turned into a job before I had even graduated from college. So an opening came up. I had this opportunity. So the final semester of my senior year, I actually was working a full-time job at the news station and also finishing my degree. And then less than a year after that, another local ABC affiliate found me and kind of poached me out of the Fox world. It happened to be closer. They gave me a little bit of a pay raise. Fresh out of school, I was feeling like $1,000,000 and found myself as a promotions producer at the Hubbard Broadcasting Company here in the Twin Cities. And they have a lot of rich history. I could go on with Hubbard for a while. Two fun facts about them. Hubbard Broadcasting invented the satellite truck.
Really?
So all the satellite trucks that we use on TV everywhere was originally a Hubbard Broadcasting invention due to a story about a whale in Alaska that they were trying to rescue. And so they sent this satellite truck up there, and it was the first ever satellite broadcast. And the reason that Hubbard was positioned to do that is that Stanley E. Hubbard had created a company that eventually became DirecTV. So he sold off to DirecTV. So they had a lot in that realm. And so it was a cool place because it was very unusually a family-owned TV station. They also own a lot of radio stations as well. So it was a really cool environment, great place to work. But it was still news, just not where I want it to be for a long period of time. I eventually went from being a promotions producer. So I never really worked directly with news, but I would make promotions for the news. And then I transitioned into commercial production, so producing commercials for local advertisers. And and then How to Make Everything landed on my lap. And so How to Make Everything was ultimately my transition out of the 9 to 5 at the TV station into doing things on my own. And I had been side hustling ever since forever, all the way through college. I was doing side gigs and everything else. My job, when I got hired at Hubbard Broadcasting, that allowed me to purchase my first camera. And I used all my nights, weekends, vacation time to produce nonprofit videos and just kind of built up a niche in the nonprofit community here in the Twin Cities.
So that took a lot of time, right? I mean, it's interesting because, I hear a lot about independent video producers, independent writers, and so on. They work in an agency and they eventually maybe spin off and do their own thing, or maybe they just market themselves out properly initially as a creative person. Your route came through news, and it's an interesting story. What was the kind of creative impetus that said, doing the news and doing this stuff was not enough, you needed to get a camera? What was it about that?
Well, it's a great question. I always kind of had an entrepreneurial itch inside of me. I wanted to have a business. And so filmmaking was my avenue to do that, to be creative, but also have a business. I guess I found that I have a unique ability to both bring in the creativity that you'll find with a lot of videographers, but then a little bit more unique is I also manage the business side, I think, fairly well. In my experience, that's a unique combination that I think has been one of the drivers of success for me.
Yeah. Do you think the understanding the business side, this is something that I get a lot from people is, you can be a business person or a creative person, but it's hard to be both. And, if any of my audience sort of knows me at all, and I think a lot of them do by this point, it's that I absolutely believe that everybody has a creative imperative, right? That whether you're in business or you're actually in a creative role, you still need to be creative, or you need to create things and exercise it's almost a duty or an obligation to create something, anything from as small as a new idea to as large as, a feature film or a novel or something, there's that whole range and spectrum. But, to say that you had that creative side going and the business side at the beginning, you kind of came into it with that understanding. I think it was probably pretty advantageous to marry the two, as you'd said, but you're bringing that to bear for nonprofits. And really, what drew you to that? What drew you to that whole nonprofit zone?
Well, it's kind of a funny story because it lined up really well, but it's not like I actually necessarily was right out of the gate, nonprofits, that's it. It kind of was a mix of things. So I was going to add that with the balance between personal and the business side of things, for me, it comes down to just being true to yourself and passionate about what you want to do. And I find success in business is that I actually enjoy that stuff just as much as I enjoy creating. And for a lot of creators, like the paperwork and the business building and the structuring that goes on with like the business side of things isn't that exciting, but it is just kind of exciting for me. I like working with numbers to a small degree. I don't actually like accounting. I will say that I'm not a fan. I'm not an accountant, not my area of expertise. But I do like just generally the structure of developing and growing a business, managing the different layers of operations that you have within a business. And that to me is a layer of creativity, like what you were describing. I think that some people can find that in a lot of things.
I don't think they're mutually exclusive, right? I mean, we that's what I said earlier, but I think, the kind of structure and framework that you need to succeed in a business, and we'll get to that in a second, I think, but when you're an entrepreneur, especially, and you're building your own business out there, and you can't go out there and just go off the cuff and just make things happen. There has to be a plan. There has to be, a method. You have to have ways to approach your clients. You have to have means of controlling those interactions, recording those interactions, and it requires eventually systems and frameworks and methodologies and all that, those kind of process related things that often creative folks kind of don't really feel the love from. You know what I'm saying? Like the enemy of creativity is process to some people, but I think it should be completely the opposite. I mean, process should be the creative person's friend. And I was wondering if you could kind of elaborate on that a little bit, because it takes a lot more than just a thought and a whim to put something on paper, or maybe to put something on paper, you could just have a thought and a whim and get something down, but it doesn't mean it's going to be good, right? I mean, but to have a product, a marketable product, and something that's entertaining or that has a story, there's a whole process involved there, right? So how do you approach it?
Yeah, well, especially with filmmaking, like you have to have a good process. That's like the biggest recipe for disaster, is just approaching a video project without a firm process in place. So we have, very kind of regular processes that we go through with different types of video projects. And it's a challenge because we work in an industry where everything is unique, right? Like we're creating unique videos. Like this isn't putting up, drywall. We're not painting houses. Like it's a little different every single time. It's a custom approach for every client. And yet we build it into this like structured process of developing that content. So the first thing you have to do is have the idea. And so that could be the same whether it's a video or a business. You have to have an idea for what you want to achieve. And then you have to create your roadmap for how are we going to get from like where we are today with nothing and ultimately have like this awesome vision that we have. Like we want to see this vision come to life. What are the steps that it's going to take to get there in between? And you just start to fill in the dots along that journey, and you're going to miss some here and there, but hopefully you get like the big dots in place and you find things out along the way, and you start to add and develop to that process until it's clear that where we're at now, there's a roadmap to get to where we want to be. So that's the same, whether it's a video, a business, or doing just about anything creatively.
Yeah. Was there a point in time where you decided that you were going to start your own business, where you're going to start Open Window, and you step back and said, okay, here's what I need to do that? Or did you sort of just happen naturally and organically? What was the kind of the MO there?
Yeah. So, you asked about getting into nonprofits. So that's a great segue into this. So, I had this camera. I started shooting some stuff because I have a camera and I can start shooting things. I knew somebody who was working for a nonprofit. So I was like, hey, you guys could probably use a video. Like, let me make you a video. So I made this cool little video for an organization that doesn't exist anymore. They had hydroponic plants that they grew with like fish tanks underneath. So there was like tilapia farms and like vegetation. It was kind of a cool thing. And it was all to educate young people about that process. But at any rate, I made a little video about their organization and was able to take that video then to the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits. I was just like, I have a nonprofit video. Let's just get in front of more nonprofits. Like, seems like they could use some stuff. So the first thing I did was got a booth at a trade show for nonprofits in the Twin Cities. It was their tech conference. So It was their like communication and marketing managers who were there to learn about integrating different areas of tech into their organization. And so we had a booth. We had like one video to demonstrate. And by we, I mean, it was myself. Originally, when Open Window was created and we did that show, I was also working with two other people, Ethan Holbrook and Chris Jopp. And we had this vision for growing the company together. But the reality of like having to stick through and grow a business, they ultimately had to get jobs and like left pretty quickly. But and Chris Jopp to this day, we're like extremely tight, and he is a phenomenal filmmaker. He's someone who is purely on like a creative visionary kind of level. Like his ideas, his executions are outstanding. And so little tangent here, but that's kind of like, I think a key to success is surrounding yourself with other people who are really good at what they do. And so I think I was lucky enough to be like around other people who were super talented. And so I took the business aspect, got us in front of this booth, and that led to us getting a contract with the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits to produce their award videos, which every year they award 6 to 7 different organizations with awards at their annual banquet. And those videos get shown in front of 800 to 1,000 different organizations, and they flash your logo up real big. And so it was like an instant in, like we had a niche because we produced 6 outstanding videos and delivered that to them and got shown in front of this huge auditorium of people. And so from there on out, it was just like nonprofits started calling. We started getting consistent work from nonprofits. But that was like way, way back in 2012, I want to say, 2012 or 2013. So it wasn't until 2016 that those gigs became consistent enough where I was able to step out. And you kind of asked about like how I got to like where I wanted to be. I framed my direction with some limitations. I didn't want to leave Minneapolis, and I'm married, and we have kids now. At the time, we didn't have kids, but it was important that I was there for my wife's career and that I wasn't traveling all the time, that we had our home base here in the Twin Cities. And in this industry, it can be quite difficult actually to find a lot of success without traveling regularly as part of your business. And so I got super lucky that I was able to get enough work and keep myself grounded here with that idea that like most of our work is in the Midwest. And we work with clients outside the Midwest as well, and we'll travel from time to time, but we're grounded right here. And that was like, kind of a big deal, and sort of put limitations in a helpful way that allowed me to focus on like, well, if I can't change these things, what can I do to succeed within the constructs of what I have available to me? And so one, it was like finding a client. So we found nonprofits. That worked out really well. And we were continuing to grow nonprofit work pretty consistently. And I knew that we had to add to that. And so I just kind of took the same approach to trying to add different types of client bases by either producing spec work or just kind of showing off what we had and getting that all brought together. And so we continue to expand on that. And the other thing I knew is that like we were getting more work and I needed to add to my team because I was relying on subcontractors pretty regularly. But I saw an opportunity to do things a little bit different with the industry. I wanted to be not like low budget, but I wanted to produce as economically efficient products as possible for clients. And I felt like there was a good way to still have very healthy margins and also to be able to bring costs down ultimately. And so in 2016, 17, as I transitioned into doing this full time, I created my creative content plan, which is a retainer model. And since then, like I've seen other video production companies doing retainer models, but at the time, like I had never seen anybody else doing that. And so I kind of just made it all up as I was going. And it was one of my greatest learning experiences because it has ultimately led to a huge amount of success. However, I anticipated that success to come a lot faster than it really did. And I think that's like one of the things that if anybody ever asks me, like, what are the things that you've learned about in growing a business? It's that things always take longer than you expect them to take, that you have to have a clear vision and you have to stick to it and you have to own it. And we did that with the creative content plan. And so that enabled me to continue to grow the team. We added a full-timer in 2019. And then last year, I had 4 full-timers over the summer because we got just so busy with so much work. And now we're down to 2 full-timers over the winter months when things slow down a little bit. But it's one of the craziest things about all of that is that we built the business by working with nonprofits. And then in 2020, all of our nonprofit business went away, literally all of it. We did not have a single, well, I shouldn't say that. We had 2 nonprofit clients we worked with, but they weren't the traditional fundraising videos that we were doing so much of. And yet, despite that, because leading up to that point, I had been working on expanding outside of that industry into more areas, commercial work in particular. We were able to get a lot of commercial work in 2020. And so despite losing what was over half our business in nonprofits, by 2020, I still continued to grow the revenue. Last year, we continued to grow revenue. So we've consistently, since the day I started this business, grown our revenue year over year by at least 20%, and in some years more than that.
Solid.
Yeah, so it's been a really good run. And so...
well, it's interesting. It's good to, and I've heard this from other entrepreneurs, is that you don't want to get bogged down or kind of hyper focused in a market that you have to be able to read the tea leaves in the markets that you're going for. So if you know that nonprofits are only going to go in your case, it was nonprofits only going to go to a certain point, you started to plant the seeds in the right way to grow your business outside of that. I was curious though, how do you market your business? Like at first, it's almost, you went really old school with, I bought a booth and did just belly to belly, you get in front of people and you find the right audience, which I'd say trade shows are often underrated. Sometimes they're really effective, but certainly if you want to collect a very specific audience of people in one place at one time, that's a pretty good way to do it. Whether or not you can break through within that show and do anything more than provide some swag that people are going to take or not take, is a different story. You have to stand out there, but at least you found the job of the targeting is done for you. How did your marketing evolve over time?
Yeah, it's an awesome question because I've always had a lot bigger ideas about what I wanted to do with our marketing than what we've ultimately ended up doing. So the funniest thing is that we produce promotional content, brand videos, and everything else for all these companies and organizations and everything else. And yet, we haven't cut a new reel officially for us since 2016. I've done yearly recaps. So we have a 2021 recap that I've been a little slow to put out because I want to make a few adjustments to it. We had a 2019. We didn't do a 2020 recap. But the funny thing is, we do just get so busy. This is one of the things I've been trying to improve in our business is to provide the time in our schedule to focus on our internal objectives as well as our clients' objectives. And that, I would say, has been one of the greatest challenges when you have a lot of work going on. And we have just consistently been fairly busy with a lot of different projects where I just either haven't had what I felt like was a need or the time to produce the type of marketing videos and content that I'd want to use to continue to grow the business. And one of my big objectives last year was to open up my time availability by growing the team. And again, that was another huge challenge because getting the right people in the right places has been the greatest challenge that I have gone through with Open Window. But we're getting there step by step. And so I see a vision for where I want to go with that. I want to produce more marketing videos, marketing content. So where we have gotten work from is a lot of just referral, word of mouth. And I do have just a small Google advertising budget that we get a bit of work from that as well. We're really highly rated on a lot of different platforms. We got Google and Facebook and Clutch.com and UpCity and nonprofit places. So I've been really good at our digital presence to get us out there. We've got a pretty good looking website. We put out a lot of good work on our website. And so, yeah, a lot of it's just been referral, word of mouth, and more the advertising. And that's where I just know that there's even more opportunity for us to continue to grow if I can focus my time the way I'd like to focus my time. But it's like, before I do that, I have to build this foundation for things to be operating the way I want them operating before I'm going to have like this additional time. And then I'm also someone who just constantly keeps throwing things on my own plate. And then that makes it hard to get things done when you just keep adding projects on top of yourself. And this is kind of a segue into Virtual Event Center, which was a 2020 pivot project where because we had lost the nonprofit business, I've been hearing from a lot of nonprofit organizations that there was like this opportunity here. So yeah, I pivoted and Virtual Event Center kind of came out, and that's like, yeah, a great example of somewhere where like it's been an awesome idea, an awesome adventure, and it has a huge amount of potential, but it's not going to succeed until I have like the time and devotion to do that. And so like was my goal for 2021 was to get Open Window in a solid place where it was operating and we had a team that I could then expand myself out into these additional opportunities that were starting to come up.
It's one of those common refrains among entrepreneurs that I've heard is you get yourself to a point with the business and you're happy with the business and it's time to make a new business, right? And the one commodity that is sadly we only have a fixed amount of is time. So how can you free yourself up to do that? And it sounds to me like you've followed a little bit of like the E-Myth kind of approach where you figured out how to work on the business instead of in the business, right? So, shout out to Bill Harper, one of my earlier guests, about this. But, when you can figure out how to extricate yourself from the workings and like from being the expert to being the leader, those are different things, and they're different traps that people fall into as a subject matter expert or as a creator. Like creatives are very prone to this. You go out and you do a freelancing business, and then essentially you could do really well that way. But you're not building a business. What you're doing is you're just working. You're just building a job. Again, there's nothing wrong with that too. But if you have the illusion that you're independent because you're not taking a paycheck from a corporation, it's an illusion because you're still taking paychecks from somebody. But to build a business that's scalable and replicable and starts to really earn, you have to separate yourself from it and work on it instead of in it. This is this very, very oversimplified way of putting it. Throughout this whole time, though, Henry, you've still been doing the creative work.
Yeah, to a large degree. I mean, and that's like what you hit the nail on the head there. I mean, especially in a filmmaking creative environment, like the business was built off of people wanting to work with me in this business because I was able to produce this content the way they wanted to. I have a good reputation. And to separate yourself from that was like a challenge where what if my clients don't want to work with somebody else? Like, what if they only wanted to work with me? Like, there's that concern that like you're letting go of it and you've built it and it's all about you. And so it's been a challenge. I'm not going to say I'm there yet because I still am very heavily involved in Open Window, but I have separated myself quite a bit as going down that exact road that you just described.
Well, finding people you can trust, people who do great work. Because, as much as we all like to think that we're the only ones who can do what we do, most of us, are, if not replaceable, at least swap outable. I don't know if that's a word, but like, you're not going to get a Henry Schneider video from anybody who's not Henry Schneider, but you'll still get a great video,
right?
From so many other, and that's the way it is. There's a lot of talented video producers out there. And if you can find them to work under you or to work for you, even better, So it's an interesting kind of approach, I think, to growing a business.
I mean, we started this conversation talking about process. Like that's ultimately what enables us to get here, right? Is that like, it's not just like the Henry Schneider ball game, right? Like this is a process that's been developed. We go through this process, whether you're me or somebody else. We actually use different software programs in order to help track that process internally, project management software and things like that, that keep teams working together, hitting goals, and doing things so that like if I'm gone for a week, I don't have to wonder like, oh, nothing happened, nothing got done. Like I know that I've got a team there who did things, that like they're communicating with our clients, that everything that needs to happen is happening. And that's like an amazing feeling. But that was, still work in process, but we've made huge strides in that direction, and it's been amazing.
Do you get as much of a joy, I'd say, out of like a project that runs smoothly as a product that looks amazing? Like, there's the process. We talked about this earlier, that you like both sides of this. And it's just fascinating to me that might be the case. So do you is your sense of euphoria or joy the same?
Yeah. I'm actually one who does not mind the revision process. Like there's definitely people on the team and a lot of creatives who like feel like when they sent it to the client, like they were really happy about it. And when the client comes back with feedback, that they're like a little bit like personally offended. And I've been like in the creative business long enough to know that like none of this is personal. Everyone's got their own ideas. I think that everyone has good ideas to contribute. And I just try to like facilitate those ideas in a way that's going to be constructive to the project. So to answer your question more specifically, I definitely prefer projects that like clients all thumbs up, everything's running smooth, we don't have any problems. Like that's always fantastic. And we've got a lot of those. But at the same time, I would also say that like the projects that I've had the most pushback on and maybe felt like I needed to put my foot down more ended up like actually being some of the best work. And I love the collaborative team working environment in that way. Like someone forces you to do something that you didn't originally think about, that you couldn't imagine working, and then you just try it and it ends up like elevating it. That's an amazing thing. So yeah, it doesn't have to be a perfect process every time, but like we're pretty good at avoiding disasters. I'm trying to think of like any disasters.
Well, I'd love to hear about disasters, of course, because we all derive all comedy is from tragedy. Is that what they say? But I'm just kind of listening to what you're saying and nodding my head along. Because, look, I've been in the PR and marketing world for a long time. I fancy myself a writer. Basically, if you're going to be good at communications, you have to first and foremost be a decent writer. And, I started off as a copywriter I started off teaching and things like that. But then when I went off on my own and got into this whole marketing communications field, I started off in copywriting. And I didn't realize that, where it was going to go. I just knew that, okay, I can write. I didn't want to work for a corporation. So I'll just say I'm a copywriter and see if I can get some work. And I happened to be in a good place for that to happen in Tokyo at the time. And I made some good connections. But I wasn't building a business. I was just getting jobs. And, at the time, I didn't know that. I wish I didn't have a plan at all, right? I really didn't. My plan was, all right, I can write. I'm just going to go convince a few people that I can write. I've given myself about 6 months, and I know some copywriters. I'm sure I can get some work. And it just turned out that was a good plan. It worked out pretty well. I have to, but I think the reason that I was successful at it, the reason I was able to build a business wasn't because I was a good writer, but because I am. But when you start off copywriting, I'm sure just like when you start off doing video or something, the work you do is basically shit. It's, as much as you think it's great, there's your client or somebody, you're going to be like, that's not what I asked you to do. So that putting that aside, it took me a little while to grow my kind of confidence in my skills. But, I think the real reason that I was successful, to get back to it, was because I just made good connections and I connected with people, right? So, I loved making connections. I also love writing, but in the end, it's really all about the people that you're interacting with. You talked about clients getting back to you with feedback, and sometimes not a great and smooth process. Sometimes it is. Everybody loves it when everybody loves the product immediately. And look, I've hired my share of video folks, of writers over the time that I've been working. I still work with a lot of independent folks or agencies, and I'm no stranger to giving feedback. I have on occasion given feedback that probably wasn't received well, I imagine. But look, a long time ago, somebody told me that as an artist, as a creator, you cannot be afraid to kill your babies. Terrible thing to say.
No, that's like a real term. Yeah, like we kind of joke around with that sometimes. Like, yeah, you got to murder that baby.
See, okay, it was a real thing then. Okay,
Yeah,
this guy was
totally
not full
real
of shit.
thing.
It was real. Okay,
yeah.
But I've been carrying that around with me, like, and I've mentioned it a couple of times, and people be like, "Oh, I never heard that before." I've always thought that, and ever since he told that to me, I'm like, "Yeah, man, you create something, it is your child. It's your creation." So you can't be that attached to it if it's for somebody else. You have to be able to cut the cord and put that red pen through it, or splice it out, or whatever it is that you need to do.
That's the hardest part. Yeah, that's hard because it's like you get attached to something and you don't even realize how attached you are to something. It's like you go through a bunch of rounds of revision, and like every time you watch it, it's like, no, that shot's not going. That's the shot, but the final version does not have that shot in it because that's just like it didn't need to be there, whatever the case, and you just like wanted to hang on to it for like personal reasons, and it wasn't really a part of the project, but you couldn't necessarily see that. That's where like the collaborative team working environment like is a must for anything creative.
Yeah, and it always helps when the client is of a creative ilk, or kind of understands creativity, or has a creative approach. Sometimes it's dangerous when the client thinks that they're a creative person, and like I said earlier, that everybody's creative. So that is true, I believe. But some people are more creative than others, right? It's not that like, if I know enough about video to be dangerous, but I don't know enough to make a video that I'm going to sell. But at the same time, if I'm sitting there talking with a vendor or a partner who has created a video for my organization, I'm not going to get into the to the frame rates, or to the kind of super heavy details. That's up to them. But I will try to keep very high level, practical feedback that is helpful instead of kind of distracting from the end result.
Well, I just like how you talked about with your writing that it was the success you found was related to your relationships and understanding of people. And I think that is the key ingredient for doing the video for sure. And I think a lot of things creatively, because what we're really doing is expressing ourselves, emotions, feelings, thoughts, and ideas. And in order to do that, you need to have that connection with someone, and you're making that connection through your art and your work. And I think that, yeah, you need to know and understand people and who you're talking to and communicating with and communicating about. And if you don't have that, then you're not going to make anything very good.
Well, clearly you need to have, at the most basic level, understand who you're communicating to, who you're writing for, who your audience is, right? But on a more kind of, I guess, personal level or meta level, you as a creator and as a business person, both, like, the relationships that you have with your subjects and with your clients are really going to drive a lot of whether or not something's good. You talked earlier about this, and I saw the kind of twinkle in your eye. Our listeners, of course, can't see this, but you talked about hydroponics. You were doing a project for a nonprofit, doesn't exist anymore. You talked about some hydroponic thing that fed tilapia. And first of all, I can't recall if I've ever heard hydroponics and tilapia in the same sentence ever, right?
It's unusual.
Yeah. You got a kick out of talking about it, right? Because it's something that you know now, right? As a creator, especially as a creator for other people, the amount of learning that we have to do is astounding. And whether or not you're actively learning something, as you go through the process of creating something for a client especially, you become somewhat of an expert in that area. And in my case, one of my first earliest writing projects was on calcium taken from dead coral reefs off the coast of Okinawa, and why calcium taken from there is makes a better vitamin supplement than calcium carbonate you buy in the store. Like, I did this 20 years ago, okay, and it's still right there, and I can tell you exactly why. Because it's porous. That was the key, right? They kept saying, calcium's porous. You remember stuff like this. But I always loved that, the fact that the creator is a learner. And I just wrote that down because I don't think I've ever necessarily said it in exactly that way. But the creator is and has to be a learner. And it seems like that's a lot of what you do.
Oh, that is my absolute favorite thing about what I do. is I get to learn a lot of different things. I get to meet a lot of different people and get into unique situations that like nobody else like would normally get in, because anytime you're watching something, somebody actually had to be the person there shooting that video content for you to watch. And so it's cool to be the person who's not just filming it, but as a director producer, really, like you said, knowing and understanding the story and having to educate yourself, because you're not just showing pictures and audio together, like you're connecting that for a meaning. And you can't do that if you don't know what the background and the history and the details are behind things like that. So yeah, I mean, not everything is the most exciting. That cotton out of California can actually be softer than cotton out of Egypt, and that Texas is the largest cotton grower in the world. But right in the Central Valley, there's also lots of cotton growing, and the agricultural fields in the Central Valley are all meticulously maintained at a 1-degree slope from one valley to the next valley, and all of the water underneath it is fully circulated and controlled. So yeah, you learn all these types of like crazy things that just like, that's never going to be useful unless I'm on a game show, but it was kind of fun to learn about, and it's cool to like see and experience the world like in a bigger way, because you see things that make the world work that we don't even realize happens on a daily basis.
So it's this ability, I think, of successful creators, or even if you don't deem yourself super successful, people with longevity in the business and who are doing so many projects, you accrue so much knowledge to yourself. You just don't know when it's going to come in handy. I find myself now, as I'm at a higher point in my career, even on a day-to-day basis, some of the shit that comes to the top of my head, I don't know where it comes from, but it came from a project somewhere. It came from a learning somewhere, from some random area. Or, I will hear of a product, I'll hear of a problem or a challenge that's happening across my organization somewhere. And because I have some weird, random, esoteric understanding of something, I can connect a dot that nobody would have connected before. It's not always a good connection, but there's value in that. And I think that creators undersell themselves sometimes in the fact that you can actually bring that to the table more than you probably know. But you know this because you're building a business out of it. And where I wanted to go with this, because I could talk about this kind of stuff forever, but where I wanted to go with this is this kind of the way that you connect with people, because it's ultimately those relationships with people that power your business forward, that get you the clients, but it's also the stories that you tell. You just talked about cotton fields. I mean, fascinating, right? But drop a couple of people into that scene, and now you have a story, right? You had a just like a scene before, but once you add people, you actually have a story. You have movement, you have action. So, it's that connection with people, and I think that over this last period of time we've been in here, things have shifted with the way people interact. And one thing I wanted to ask you about is how you've seen that shift happen, because you're creating film and video, but you mentioned earlier and I mentioned too, the virtual event center, right?
Yeah.
This is driven by these changes in connections. So what's happened in your world that made you go in that direction?
It was naturally a COVID shift, but that process allowed me to tap into something a lot bigger. And the more time I spend with it, the more I realize how important this change is. And that change is thinking about the way we interact digitally different, because we all had to do that during COVID, and we found things that we liked and didn't like about it. And yet there's these huge advantages to the digital space when it can be done in a controlled and meaningful way. And so what I mean by that is, like, when you put things out on Facebook or YouTube, it becomes public. It's open for anybody to criticize, to comment on, and to weigh in on. You've got internet trolls who make us laugh and cry and go, why am I on the internet? And yet there's like this great space for all these like meaningful things to happen. And there's a lot of things that should be happening in a digital environment. And so what I feel like is missing on the internet today are what I call intentional communities. And I know that's not like my term or anything like that, but I think it's an important thing to really think about how we're approaching digital platforms is like, what type of community is being built up on here and how am I engaging with that community? Because when you put stuff out on like a public platform like Facebook, you're opening yourself up to the world. And I don't think that's exposing yourself to the world is always the best idea. I think if you want to have like really meaningful, constructive ideas and conversations and thoughts, it's better in a platform where people can have their ideas shared safely, where you can be around other people who have the same level of experience and expertise that you have in order to like dive deeper into subject matter that you can't dive into. I mean, we're stuck with like headlines and like little sound bites, and we don't get to the subject and the substance of any real conversation on any of the platforms that are out there. And I feel like we need a platform that allows people to have meaningful conversations that like move ideas and issues forward. And it's a safe place for those ideas to come forward. And so that's what I'm trying to build with Virtual Event Center. I mean, ultimately that format was, that's what happens at conferences. Like if you've been to, I mean, I know you were, you said the last conference you were at was Social Media World 20.
Yeah, Social Media Marketing World 2020. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like, there's something magical about those events. Like you're around other people who are in the same industry and you're sharing ideas and you've got all these different ideas bouncing out and you got energy, and that all disappeared when we couldn't do conferences. And so I built the Virtual Event Center to be that exact same space in a virtual environment. And I just don't see that existing anywhere else right now. What I hope is different about Virtual Event Center, like right now, it's an early platform that has the basics to it, and it functions a lot like a lot of the other virtual event platforms that are out there. But where I hope we go with it is building this space where people can have that deeper level of engagement. And one of the big differences that we have with our platform versus other platforms out there is that every user has a profile. You have to create an account. You can fill out your profile with as much info as you want. And that's one layer that we're trying to open things up a little bit more with the platform to create a deeper level of engagement beyond just showing up for a Zoom event. You want to get to know other people who are there. You want to be able to have conversations with them. And so, yeah, that's what we're working towards.
So to me, and I'm old, right? By digital standards, I'm ancient. I've been on LinkedIn almost like certainly since almost 20 years, right? So 2000. When did LinkedIn start? LinkedIn started 2002. I think that's when I got it. It was the end of 2002, early 2003. So right at the beginning. And, I say that like it's a badge of honor when in fact it's just like I've just been around for a long time in this space, right? And when I hear you talk about that, I think about back in those days, there's a lot of social networks being formed, right? Somebody came up with social media after that, which is a better term. And by the way, just a little bit of trivia. In Japan, they still call them social networking services, right? They're still SNSs, but everywhere in the rest of the world is social media. But anyhow, back in the social networking days, social and networking were the key terms. Media was not the key term for a reason. It wasn't a broadcasting platform. It was a meeting platform.
Yeah.
And almost what you're trying to do here, where you are supposed to be joining these communities of maybe like-minded people, but certainly digitally forward people to exchange ideas in a safe space. And early days, maybe it was just a bulletin board kind of approach. LinkedIn was, you had a profile and you connect for business purposes. And it was kind of cool that way. Very basic. And, of course, immediately people knew that this is a recruiting platform, like just from the get-go. But there was a lot of effort in this. Even LinkedIn and even Facebook's original kind of, structure was you had to be part of a community to join. You had to be part of a university.
Yeah.
The only way I could join Facebook in whatever it was 2009 or something was because I had a upenn.edu alumni email address. Otherwise, I couldn't join Facebook.
I'm going to sound young because I had to find a college student because I was in high school when Facebook came out.
See? So, I mean, you are young though. You're younger than me, and certainly young enough that when that was happening, you must have been in high school. So point is, right, that these original platforms were designed almost for that same reason, to the safe space, exchange of ideas. And then, advertising came, media came, trolls came. There were trolls from the beginning, don't get me wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
But you didn't have Twitter and then like 5 media outlets that were like posting tweets all day.
No, 9 days, like the slippery slope that began in 2003 and 4 really slipped and sloped. I mean, it has gone about as bad as it could possibly have gone. So what you do at a virtual event center, and what I've seen like other virtual event platforms, where, you're going from the point of view of this is a conference. So it's temporary, right? Initially.
They can be both. So we actually allow both 1 day, multiple day, and subscription type events. So that's actually one of the areas that I'm really excited about this year, is getting into co-working spaces. So we're part of a co-working space here in the Twin Cities. And, there's 165 members that are part of this networking. It's actually all an artist, entrepreneurial, creative kind of place called Creator Space in St. Paul. And it's a phenomenal space. They have all these great classes, but there's not like a centralized place to necessarily like connect. Like they have a Facebook page and you could probably find people on Facebook. But like if you wanted to just make it about the community, there's not that right now. And so we're going to use them as kind of one of our test cases for these co-working spaces, where if you want to get to know and connect with people better, then members are allowed to post their sessions. So kind of like you have your podcast here, it's like anybody can post this as part of like that member group. And like you put up your content, other members can like watch that content. You can chat with each other about it. You can post about it. And you can even join in face-to-face on scheduled time. So you can watch it live. You can watch it after. I think that was like the other big thing that I wanted to tackle with a digital platform, is that you can't expect people to sit in front of their computers for 8 hours. And like a lot of people are doing that for these virtual conferences. And it's just like, you need to rethink the way that you're doing a virtual conference. If you're asking someone to sit in front of their computer for 8 hours, that just does not make sense. And so one of the things that I think is really important as we transition to this hybrid type of space is the idea of both a scheduled and organic aspect to how you engage in the content. So you need to be able to come at it when you're ready, when you want to spend an hour with it if that's what you want to do, or to spend 8 hours if that's what you want to do. But like too many virtual hybrid events are still being built in like that old model. And that's the greatest challenge of what we're trying to do, is like, not only are we asking you to use like this brand new platform that nobody's heard of and you don't have any idea how to use it, but we also want you to completely rethink your entire event. So it's a huge ask, but at the same time, I think that the reward is going to be apparent. And that's what we've been trying to do, is just get like these handful of events on the platform that really demonstrate how events can be thought about differently, how you can engage people differently. And so it's a work in progress, but I'm really hopeful that it goes that way. And I'll actually say on like a Facebook side of things, like, yeah, don't like Facebook, but I love the metaverse. And so I'm very excited about where they're going with the metaverse. And I also definitely see a lot of opportunities in the next 5 years for Virtual Event Center to be very integrated into the metaverse. I'll just give you a short example, because this technology pretty much doesn't exist right now, but I guarantee you it will in 5 years, is augmented reality glasses that will enable you to turn your screen into a more immersive environment. And if you imagine a virtual event platform in which you could put on these augmented reality glasses and then like see all of your different conference options and like be able to have additional layer of engagement in the conference in a virtual space, I'm just like, there's a lot of directions that the metaverse can go. And so that's got me excited on like a big picture.
Yeah, I've been hearing a lot about that lately, of course, as I think everybody has. But that and the virtual chat rooms, these kinds of things where, people are putting on all their gear and kind of immersing themselves. It would be, I don't want to necessarily put on a pair of goggles and gloves and start walking around, but a pair of glasses might be fun, go back to that kind of light, just a light kind of virtual light, not quite fully matrixed in, but definitely kind of getting the experience. Like everything seems to be, like, it just seems to be coming around. You might remember way back when the whole idea, like Second Life, the platform Second Life, which was, I think it's still around, but that's these things are a more natural outgrowth of what Second Life should have become or was going to become, And apart from creating an avatar that can fly, Second Life really was. I think it was eventually kind of taken over by unsavory, a lot of unsavory actors in there, but it just sort of lost its appeal. But now the technology is crazy with metaverse, and I think what Second Life wanted to achieve can be achieved more in the metaverse. And I'm still early days in it too, clearly, because I'm sort of fumbling as I talk about it. But I know that it's something to be aware of, and that was kind of bringing me to some of the final questions I had for you, which was like, what are you thinking about the future? You just told me about the metaverse, and I guess as a video producer, it's sort of natural. It's a visual medium, and connecting it with safe environments like your virtual platform, sounds like a kind of haven, like you're creating a haven from the nonsense that's out there, right? But quick question about the virtual platform, though, is that when people are joining the platform or using the virtual event center, are they coming in as a affinity group, like part of a company or part of a club or something like this, or is it individualized?
No, everyone's an individual. All accounts are individual accounts. And then you register. So you create an account on Virtual Event Center, and then you register for your events once you have an account on the platform. And so there's that higher layer. You're not like a lot of platforms out there, you have an assigned account or you have something like that to like log you into the virtual event. And in this case, you actually have an entire profile all of your own. And so that's where eventually there will be a lot of opportunity for us to take advantage of that and to add a lot more engagement and tools for people to utilize.
Interesting. So apart from metaverse, is there anything else happening that our listeners should be aware of, or something you want to talk about?
Well, you threw out this question in our prep questions.
Yeah.
I thought it was a great question because I've been in a really introspective part of my life right now as I have been growing the business, Open Window Productions, and dealing with the challenges that come along with that. And then also adding on this second business that like I don't have like a tech background. I don't really know much of any coding. And so I've like thrown myself into an entirely new space out of an idea and a vision for what could be. And then at the same time, I have my family. I've got a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. He's almost 3. And my wife, and, I like to get outside and I like to enjoy my life. And so finding balance in a busy schedule has been the hardest thing because I can't be effective at any one thing if I don't have balance in my life. Like if you're coming at things from an unhappy perspective, it's hard to put out your best of anything. And I think that's like been one of the most important things for me to realize is that like we can make these illusions for ourselves that things are that you don't have to like go like nobody's going to notice if I don't do this perfect, or like I can cut a corner here and like nobody's going to notice. You can make like these like tiny little decisions that don't have any immediate consequence, but ultimately slow you down from your goal. And I think that's like the most important thing that I've been trying to find is just like finding that balance in life. So I brought this up because Dan knows one of the most creative projects I've been able to work on recently. I don't do like anything personal like ever, but my dad recently passed and I had an opportunity to go through his photos and cut this memorial video. And it was the first time like literally since college that I had done something for myself as like a personal project. And I'm just extraordinarily proud of how that video came together because it meant so much to me, and people got to see a little bit and got to know me a little bit more.
Yeah.
So it was just a reminder that there's a lot, even when like things are there's like a lot happening. Like the most important thing is you have to center yourself and find balance and make sure that you have a path and a direction that's going to fulfill you without draining you, and that you're not setting unrealistic expectations for yourself, and that you're taking your past experiences and applying those to future success. And so I mentioned earlier about like creative content plan was a lot slower process to get launched. And so I take that learning experience into Virtual Event Center and say, we're barely past the 1 year mark on this platform. And like, we have already done a ton with it, and it's still early. And in your earlier podcast, you use this term like shiterations. And I love that, because I feel like that's where we're at with virtual event centers. We're making these shiterations where it's like, this is not the vision I had for it, but at the same time, the ball is moving in the right direction. And as much as like I want it to be moving faster, I also have to like acknowledge the time factor, and that things don't happen overnight, and it takes time and persistence. And it's easy to get distracted from that if you don't have balance. So that's how it circles all back, is it's like, if you don't have balance, and those things, they won't ever come to fruition. It'll always be an idea that you're chasing, unless you're able to find yourself in like the day-to-day here and now.
I think it's a beautiful thing to say, and it's an important thing to say, and it's a great way to sort of wrap this up. But this whole idea of sticking to what's important, making sure you acknowledge and do what's important to you. Don't lose sight of that as you move forward. If you don't, that will in turn fuel and power your other endeavors. I love what you did with your dad. And I was saying before we hit the record button today, last time I spoke to Henry, and I hope Henry doesn't mind me sharing. I'll edit it out if you don't. But the first time I spoke to Henry was November the 24th of 2021. And, we had a good conversation. Everything. Henry looked a little tired, a little frazzled. I'm like, what's going on? Oh, nothing. My dad's in hospice. And the following day.
Just another 2021 curveball.
Yeah, another 2021 curveball. And the following day, Henry's father passed away. And may he rest in peace. And I encourage everybody, if Henry allows me to share it, I'll put a link in to the tribute you did for your dad. Almost a moving slideshow of photos that you had taken, your dad taken, some video and interacted in.
He took just about all of them.
He took all of them.
He pretty much took all of them.
Beautiful. His dad did a lot of traveling. You learn that in the video. But look, it's touching. It's Henry's perspective. It's a son reaching out to his dad. And I have a personal stake in that, as everybody who's listening to this knows that my dad passed when I was 12. So look, beyond being an entrepreneur and a video producer and a platform developer and a creative, I guess, innovator, Henry's also a human and somebody who needs to be reaching out and touching his own humanity. And that's how, that balance you're talking about, that's a good example of how that balance is so critically important and centers you. And I mean, everything you've said makes perfect sense to me. And look, I really encourage our listeners here to go check out that video, learn more about you, Henry. I don't like to end on a downer at all, because it's not. It's emotional, but it's very, very beautiful. And as a creator and as somebody who who goes through the different stages of life, you out there, my listeners, and anybody who's interested in this stuff, I mean, give it a go. Henry's LinkedIn profile is, just look for Henry Schneider in Minnesota. There's a lot of Henry Schneiders out there, but the Henry Schneider in Minnesota, Open Window Productions, and his name will be spelled properly in the episode title. You can check out open-window-production.com to learn more about Henry's video business, and a lot of we didn't even touch on the drones, man. Just great stuff with drones. And where else can a virtual event center is thevirtualeventcenter.com. And I think that your dad's video is linked there. Is that right?
Actually, so the entire memorial was on the Virtual Event Center. And so that is still up there. I'm pretty sure you can register for free for that event if you want to see the whole thing. Otherwise, I don't know if you have a link or anything. It's on my Vimeo or my Facebook page.
Okay. I'll share the link to the video. And did I miss anything, Henry? Where else can people find you? Are you on Twitter? Are you on Instagram? Anything else out there?
I'm like the worst on social media. I'll be honest with you. I don't do a whole lot on social media. I consume a bit, and our business puts out content a bit. But to be honest with you, I'm not out there a whole lot. I am on Twitter at Henry F. Schneider. If you tweet me, I'm probably not going to respond. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
LinkedIn's great, though. I do like LinkedIn, and I browse that. I don't put a lot on there. And then our Facebook page is we got a Facebook open window page, and a Facebook, YouTube. The area where I put most of my stuff out as a video person is Vimeo. So if you find us Open Window Production on Vimeo, that's where stuff is posted all the time.
Terrific. Well, listen, Henry, I've had a really, really great time talking to you and getting to know you better. I wish you the best of luck with your business, of course. And, now I have reason to visit the Twin Cities. It was a really great honor and a pleasure to speak with you, Henry. Thanks so much. And thank you so much for joining the show.